introduced this concept of the CIA, which you all know, right? CIA, C for the confidentiality, the I for the integrity, and the A for the availability. When you look at the government sector, what is really the most critical element of security? You'll notice it's the confidentiality aspect, right? We talk about classification models of data, from top secret to secret, confidential. We talk about different access levels that are perceived with this data. Every employee has certain access level, and depending on his access and his privileges, he has certain access to sensitive data or certain access to documents. But when we talk about industry control systems, that's not what really matters. What really matters is to have the A component. These services run critical, these infrastructures run critical services like water, gas, and so forth, and they need to be up all the time at all costs. And that is why it explains the other two points, actually. A lot of the old systems, they depend on legacy equipment that have been running for fault-free for decades, even though there are new equipments that are out there with better performance and probably easier to manage. The other point is that a lot of these systems, they use off-the-shelf products to cut down costs. Off-the-shelf commercial operating systems, Windows, Linux, which need to be patched on a regular basis. The other thing is that there's always this temptation, or there's always this perception that these systems are air-gapped, which is actually not true. A lot of these systems are connected through the internet, which implies anyone who has access to the internet may target these systems. So let's talk about each of these points in more details. Availability requirements. You cannot risk downtime by allowing automatic security updates for industry control systems that could cause system restart or shutdown. The other point, it is uncommon for organizations responsible for critical infrastructures to continue running them even if there is a malware infection that is being detected. And that also explains why a lot of these systems, when you want to collect forensics evidence, it's extremely difficult because you cannot just take down an equipment and do a DD on the hard disk and prepare an image for forensics analysis. You need to you need to find other ways and maybe approach the problem by capturing the live memory forensics for these devices. And these may or may not give you, may or may not give you the cues that you need for the analysis. Is there anything? Okay. Okay, sorry. I probably need to keep it live. Okay. So that covers the availability component. Now let's talk about the second challenge, which is interoperability with legacy systems. The old systems, especially in the US and Europe, they are typically running for about 15 to 30 years. Some of these equipments may have existed in the pre-internet era, and they're not really designed for secure connectivity, nor some of them, they don't have even the means to authenticate commands received. So a lot of these equipments, the products are not secure by design. And when you understand that, we also understand there's a lot of these equipments, they may have limited capacity. The CPU may be small, the processor may be small, with limited computing capabilities, with limited RAM, and you'll not be surprised that a lot of them may not even run basic antivirus software. So given that, there's also the third challenge, the use of insecure operating systems. And we're talking about the commercial operating systems here. Windows, Linux, and so forth. And why they're using these operating systems? Well, for ease of management and cutting down costs. But the problem with these operating systems is that you need to patch them on a regular basis. Do you know when's the patch day for Windows? Tuesday is the patch day for Windows, right? So every Tuesday, new set of patches are released that you need to keep up with. The last thing, which is the need for connectivity. As we just mentioned, these systems are not air-gapped. They are connected to the internet, and thus anyone who has access to the internet may target these systems. Now let's talk about the fun part. What are the different attacks that might be faced with these systems, right? So the first one is Stuxnet, the malware that hit the Iranian nuclear plant in 2010. It was designed to attack the Siemens PLCs, and it had exploited 4 zero-day flaws at that time. Stuxnet reportedly compromised Iranian PLCs, collecting information on the industrial systems and causing fast-spinning centrifuges to tear them apart. Some of the technical details about Stuxnet: it used kernel driver signing to get its code to be trusted. And the way it did that, the developers had actually stolen the private keys for 2 famous Taiwan companies, Realtek and J-Micron, and they signed their code using their certificates. Here are some of the Stuxnet infection statistics. This is depicted from the Stuxnet semantics dossier report, and you'll see that about 58% of the infections were in Iran, about 17% were in Indonesia, and about 10% were in India. How does Stuxnet work? First, it starts with the infection phase. In the infection phase, apparently what had been done, they got a USB infected, somehow got into the premise of the nuclear facility, and it was stuck in one of the Windows machines. And with the nice feature of Windows, we have the auto run, the malware kicks in, and then the malware starts to scan for PLCs. So when it scans for PLCs, if it finds the Siemens PLCs, it will check whether it's within the IP address range of the target, whether it's, for example, in the Iranian IP address range. If so, it will download the latest copy of itself from the internet, and then it will start to compromise. It will, as we explained, it will do the fast spinning of the centrifuges, first from the clockwise direction, and then from the anti-clockwise direction, until it breaks, and then it will start to propagate to other parts of the network, disguising itself and sending false reports to the controllers, and hopefully expanding on the attack. The next one is the Heartbleed. Heartbleed was a vulnerability disclosed in April 2014. This was last April. This is a bug in the OpenSSL library. And it is one of the critical bugs that have been reported out there. And it created a shock in the community. The problem with the Heartbleed attack, it allowed anyone in the internet to read the live memory content of the server. So if you have an internet-facing server, anyone, if they are running the OpenSSL library, maybe, for example, they have an HTTPS service running that library, anyone on the internet can probe that server and read the live memory content. What's the problem with that? Well, you can read secret keys used to identify services. You can read the names and passwords. You can read session cookies that belong to the applications that are hosted by the server. So that's a problem. Here's an example of a script that I actually run. I have a Python script I run on some government website. And we're sending the SSL handshake, client hello, server hello, so forth. And now I got my session cookies. See, I'm reading the live memory content. See, these are the session cookies from the server. If the server is hosting some application, if I'm an attacker, I would have copied the session, and if it didn't expire, I might hijack the application. Shellshock shocks you, right? Discovered in September 2014. It's a devastating flaw in the Unix bash, which allows attackers to run deep-level shell commands on the victim machine. It affected Unix-based environments, and from Linux, OS, Unix, and so forth. It affects different range of devices, routers, all Internet of Things devices, and even devices in your industrial control systems. The problem with Shellshock is that, in a lot of cases, you will have the web server, for example. It will be processing the HTTP request that is sent. So you have like a web request that is sent to the server. And it takes the argument of the headers and use that to set the bash. So eventually what you can do, you can define bash commands in the HTTP header. The web server will parse it, and then that will set the environment variable. And I'll show you a demo of how something like this would work. To check that if you're vulnerable to Shellshock, all you have to do is to apply the function definition on the environment variable, semicolon, and your command that you wish to execute. If it is unpatched, you will get the echo vulnerable. This is a test. If your bash is patched, then it will complain. Let me show you some demos. How about that? So I set up 2 virtual machines here. I don't know if you can see the whole screen. Display. Let's see. Much better? Yeah, a little bit better. Okay. Okay. So we'll close this presentation. I have 2 virtual machines. Let's start with this one. This virtual machine runs a vulnerable. Is it large enough? Okay. It runs a vulnerable version of OpenSSL. So OpenSSL version, that's my vulnerable version, okay? And it's hosting an HTTPS service. So what I'll do, I'll run my script that I just showed you in the slides. Python. Let me show you the IP address. 192.168.8.103. All I have to do is just specify that address, 192.168.8.103, and then the port service is 8443. And, oops, pardon. Oh, sorry, I didn't specify the script, which is a good thing. Voila, the server is vulnerable. Can you see it? Here's the live memory content of the server. So let's go up and look at the display. It starts with the SSL handshake. So with SSL, the client will send a client hello, and then the server will respond. And then there is an Heartbleed request that is sent, and then you get the Heartbleed response. Here's the live memory content of the server. If the server was running anything interesting, you'll see some goodies in the live memory content. Okay? So that's SSL Heartbleed. Let's go to the other version of virtual machine. I'm going to demonstrate here Shellshock. Okay? So with Shellshock, I have a CGI script. Yeah, this is the CGI script. Let's just cat it to see. Now, this is the vulnerable script that I would like to show you. What it does, it takes the HTTP refer header and just echoes it back to bash. So eventually, well, you can define your commands in this header, and that will execute on the victim machine. So I'll show you a script that I wrote that does that. This is a Python script that I wrote. Is it large enough? Probably not. Yeah, I want to show you the script this way. So here, after I define the parse the arguments, what I do here, I check for internet connectivity, and I send the GET request that I want to send. And then I specify in the refer header, it's at the bottom here, I specify the command that I want to run. So I want to run a TCP reverse connection that will prompt for bash. So I want to run a copy of bash from my machine that I get from the victim machine, right? So I set up my IP address and the listening port. And I will just run the script and show you how that works. Okay, this is my bash. All I have to do, Python, Shellshock, and then specify the IP address that I want, 192.168.8.101. And let me set up a listener. And the listener is on port 444. Okay. And voila, I got bash. My privileges are the web server credentials, okay? If I was an attacker, what I would do, I would poke around, try to get a local privilege vulnerability, and then I become root. When you become root, it's like the admin in Windows. You have full control of the machine, okay? So that's how Shellshock works. Now going back, do you have any questions on the demos before I continue? Oh, I send a GET request. The GET request has the refer header that I showed you. And the server will parse my GET request and will send a reverse TCP connection to port 4444. And I just listen to that port, and I get a command prompt. Yeah, you need to have a vulnerable script, CGI script, on the victim machine, which is there in practice. There are vulnerable CGI scripts there. Okay? The last attack I would like to mention is the BadUSB, right? The BadUSB. It's a critical vulnerability in the design of USB devices, allowed hackers to reprogram the firmware. Even if you are checking for viruses on the USB, you plug in the USB device, and you have an antivirus package that is scanning the device, it may not detect it. Why? Because a lot of the conventional device antivirus, they only scan the drive. Well, the BadUSB is actually within the firmware. So eventually, what happens is the BadUSB can pretend to be anything. They can pretend to be a keyboard, they can pretend to be a mouse, they can pretend to be any peripheral device, and kick it into once you plug it in, they can hijack user internet traffic, they can install additional malware, they can gain control of any devices that you have plugged in, like the keyboard and the mouse. So to solve this problem, really, you need to use signed firmware devices, signed firmware USB devices, and you need to employ device lock solutions in your host. Okay. Getting to the end, how to prevent these attacks? You need to understand the security risks. You need to understand the threats. You need to understand the vulnerabilities, and all of these are, as a comprehensive understanding of these elements, you implement them in your operations, you implement them in your security awareness and training, you implement them with the technologies that you procure or select for implementing your controls. That requires understanding the physical environment, your perimeter defenses, the policies and procedures, the training and awareness, and so forth. For the secure architecture design, the main point here is to have compartmentalization and segregation. You need to segregate the external zone from the internal zone, and within the internal zone, not everything is trusted at the same level. You need to divide them into different zones. And wrapping up to the conclusion, you need to understand the policies and procedures, follow effective security policies and procedures with control system specific requirements. And these are some of the examples. You need to prepare a patch management plan and procedures to defend against published vulnerabilities. You need to adopt security training and robust security awareness programs that are specific to control systems. And if you're deploying SIM technologies for central log management, you need to train and build an incident response team that uses the outputs of these systems and have a governance framework where going from the monitoring phase to the detection to the response phase. And with that, I leave it to questions, and if you find anything wrong with that, let me know.
Thank you, Omar. Can I get a big hand of applause? Thank you for that.